Hello, welcome to the National Shattering Silence Coalition's YouTube channel. Today, we are interviewing one of our members, my friend, Katie Dale. Katie, good to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
We are now joined by Katie Dale, who is no stranger to the storms of serious mental illness. She's an author of a memoir about her faith through psychiatric hospitalizations. She advocates online, blogging, speaking, and sharing her story. When she's not standing up for brain disorder equity, she is getting creative in her freelance design business. She's mom to one child on earth and one in heaven, wife to her hero in uniform, and currently resides in Florida. You can find her at katiedale.com and online with the social media handle at Katie R. Dale. All right, Katie, good to have you.
Hi, thank you, Eric. It's so good to be here.
And what part of Florida do you live in?
We're near Destin in the Panhandle.
Oh, okay. And where are you? Coast. And where are you from originally?
Albany, New York.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And what made you decide to become an advocate?
The experiences I've had, personal lived experience with serious mental illness, serious brain disorders.
Okay. What made you decide to include a memoir as a part of this advocacy?
Part of it was cathartic, and in writing it and journaling it out, it helped me heal. But the other part was I'm a writer by nature, and I want to express myself and let other people understand through education, purpose, and letting them see it through my eyes, how it happened, for them to better understand and know how to respond to those who are going through something like this.
Okay. And what is the title of your book?
It's called But Deliver Me from Crazy, a memoir.
And why did you choose the title?
So it kind of gives a nod to the Lord's Prayer where he says, lead us from temptation, but deliver us from evil. And I am very faith-filled. And because my journey in this book is so Christ-centric, that I wanted to capitalize on that faith piece, but deliver me from crazy, because I was feeling crazy. I was feeling mad throughout my journey, and I wanted to be delivered from it, which is what I sought, as you'll see.
So, okay. So a lot of people get really mad when people use terms like crazy, but you...
Right, and I addressed that in the foreword and in the author's note, that I'm using crazy in a way that is how I perceived myself.
Okay.
I personally would say I was not in my right mind, and I'm using the term that way because I felt crazy, and that's how I associate with it. Also because I want to be delivered from, the stigma of crazy. You could read it either way.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So you're not one of those advocates that acts like, oh, mental illness is just a higher state of consciousness. You view it as a disease that needs to be treated and not Absolutely. A right that needs to be protected.
Yes, right. It can be a little bit hard to define, in my own personal opinion, with the rights, but because I had an insight to what I was going through, I did have that voluntary admission into the hospital, and I was treated as such.
Oh, so you had insight. You knew something was wrong.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, because some people experience what is called anosognosia, where you're too delusional to know you're delusional.
Anosognosia, yes. And I talk about that, and I address that in the book as well.
All right.
Because I had, if I can go on, I had a sense of feeling like I was healed and believing I was healed. And so part of that was almost like an ignorance, or you might call it anosognosia, where I didn't realize I needed the medicine to stay sane. But a part of it was, for me, a denial that I needed the medicine. And I was proud, but I realized some people, about half of us, don't realize at all that we're sick, which was somewhat where I could fit into that segment of 50% that don't realize, because at the time I didn't believe I was sick. I believed I had my medicine, and that I didn't realize it was because of the medicine. And so I was really believing I was healed. So at that point, I think I was touched by anosognosia in a way, if we can say that. It was probably somewhat anosognosia to me,
Oh,
until I went through the hospitalizations, the second part of the book.
uh,
Later on in life, when I went off the medicine and realized, um, through all that hardship going off the medicine the second time, going off the medicine, I realized, oh, I need the medicine, and
mhm.
I need to get on that. That was what was making me better. So yeah, I feel like it was a deliverance almost from that too.
All right. And what challenges did you have trying to write in terms of true stories, identities of your characters, being skewed in a state of mind, and recording your perception of what actually happened or not?
So some people have come to me after they've read the book, and they've commented, and they're like, well, I couldn't tell which was hallucination or delusion or real. And to that I say, in that frame of mind, I couldn't tell either. So as I'm telling the story, if you can't if you can't understand, or you can't tell or perceive what's real or not, neither could I. And that's why.
Okay.
So there's that. It's kind of like, do you have to know what's real or what's not? Most 80%, I would say, if I could give it a number, was real. What happened to me in the hospital, and how I record it and document it in this book. And the other 20% is probably hallucinations. But to pick out what was real, what wasn't, it's complicated, I think. You can't really, sometimes you can't tell. And if the reader can't tell, neither can I, like that's kind of not the whole takeaway from the book, but it's a piece of it. So it made it very interesting to write, because I had
Okay.
those memories as I went through. And that was what, hey, if I perceived it that way, that's what happened. That was my reality. That's what happened.
Okay. And how have your friends and family reacted to the book?
Positive, mostly positive. Um, People are, especially friends and family that were in the book. I changed names and identities except for my mother, father, brother, and husband, because it was, okay with them for me to put, I got their permission. But legally, I had to, stay
Hmm.
safe. I needed to change names of people and places, which I did, and their identities and how I present them. Some characters are not like the demographic that they actually are in real life, so that I could, watch my legal butt there. But it was really, interesting that my friends and family, even now to this day, are getting back to me, and they're saying, "Oh, I read it. I didn't realize what you went through." So because I'm very, introverted, and at that age I was very introverted, and I didn't express myself and what I was going through. It was all in my mind, a lot of it, in the sense that I experienced it up here and I didn't express it. So now that I've expressed it in the book, they're like, "Oh, wow, I didn't realize you went through it." But they're very supportive. They're very understanding once they've read the book. I had somebody tell me they cried, a close family member cried after they read the book. I feel like it's hopefully, an eye-opening account for those who know me and those who don't.
Who are you most grateful for in your journey through your story? And when were you first diagnosed?
I think I would attribute my help to the people in the first hospital that I was at 16. There was an aide there, tech, or what staff member, facility person. She was there for me at my side from the second I got into the place, being I was out of sorts, plus behind closed doors, those locked closed doors,
Mhm.
and around strangers. She came up to me. Her name in the book is Rosie, and she was phenomenal to me. She, as you'll see if you read the book, she took me under her wing. She comforted me, showed me how to breathe when I was getting anxious, cross my arms over my chest and breathe in the good and breathe out the bad. Like, just small coping skills like that. She just, showed me and gave me that time and attention. And that really stuck with me. I will probably, hopefully, name one of my daughters after her, uh, her real name. And I just feel there was such a kindred spirit and a kind soul there that I'd hope that I could be, at least I'd hope that I could be as compassionate to others as she was toward me in that unit. So
All
she
right.
really influenced me and my parents, my aunt, Kathy. She was there for my parents as we were walking through the hospitalization the first time. She's in a state in like New Hampshire. We're in New York, but as she's, learned things from her son who was autistic and has autism, and she was learning things through the state processes there with the mental health department there. She was guiding my parents through the same processes for them to get me the help I needed. So she was very instrumental. But people like that, are always good, so valuable to have in your life to walk you through these things. And I hope I'm in turn with the advocacy with National Shattering Silence Coalition and trying
Yes.
to, yeah,
Me and
trying to
Katie,
do the same and return the favor.
me,
So
me and Katie. Oh, also, I forgot. My name is Eric Diaz, the host. And tell me a little bit more about the National Shattering Silence Coalition.
So I found out about the coalition through someone who I'd interviewed on my blog. I keep a blog since 2015 or 14. I've been blogging about my bipolar disorder. So I wanted to interview somebody. I came across, I think she had an ad on Facebook for this book called Breakdown. So the author, Lynn Nanos.
Lynn Nanos, author of the book
Yes.
Breakdown. Yes.
She
And
reached
for
out.
those of you that don't know, Lynn Nanos wrote a great book, similar to Katie's, where she changed names, but of her clients, but of just what it's like for an emergency psychiatric emergency social worker to go out and try to get help for people when the laws protect their right to be sick and wind up in jails, prisons, homeless, and death. And like these laws have good intentions, but if you're trying to get help for these people, it's very frustrating. The people that Lynn Nanos advocates in her book Breakdown are very much the people that me and Katie advocate for at the National Shattering Silence Coalition.
Right. So I connected with her. So I joined after I interviewed. She referred me to Jean, I believe. And Jean answered questions. I was writing an article on my blog a few years later, this past year, about reclassification. Why would we call serious mental illness anything else? Well, because serious brain disorders are a more accurate term. And I had written up that article after interviewing Jean. She asked me and invited me to become a part of the coalition. So now I serve on the Policy Action Committee. We're trying to write position statements to assert ourselves and our beliefs that in order to fix the system, we got to do a lot of rearranging to do for the healthcare system, for the way society views and approaches mental illness in general. So we're really working on the foundational level to make those changes happen.
All right. And who do you want to read this book, Katie?
Really, anybody who's interested in how we can change the mental health care system in the US, abroad as well. But these are experiences that I had in New York State and in Florida. And for those states at any level, whether you're patient, provider, politician, to understand what it's like for the patient, because who's at the end of the food chain here? It seems to be the patient is suffering from inconsistencies of the laws that need to be changed at the political level, down to the providers and the insurance provisions at that level, down to I need to stay more than 3 days here because I'm not well, but it takes more than 3 days to get well when I'm the patient. So.
And I believe you talked about this in the book where your husband had really good insurance through TRICARE.
Mhm.
So you were there. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you were there, and that they kind of slow walked a lot of your classes and stuff. Whereas people
Yes.
whereas people with less I guess less good health insurance were in and out. And
Yeah.
yeah, so tell me about that. So the care is determined by what health insurance you have, not by any medical criteria.
Oh, yeah, isn't that backwards?
Yes.
I'm surprised that we do that. We allow that because in the medical field, I don't know that that's
Yeah,
usually
they
the
should,
case.
unless these, yeah, that is something that I often think, like, these insurance companies are practicing medicine without a license because they're making all the decisions.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, it's a shame. It's a really poor way to treat people, especially when there's no standards or requirements or uh, expectation. Well, standards really across the states to treat people who are inpatient in these hospitals and in these units. It's not like anybody calls them accountable. They don't have certain, levels of care or treatment that they need to prove that they're meeting necessarily. CCBHCs are different. I think that's for another conversation. But in the inpatient psychiatric units or psychiatric facilities, it's not like you're going to see a doctor at this frequency, this many days a week. It's not like they're not held to a certain standard to be able to meet and treat the patient. Based on what I know, I was in there for 11 days at a time, but as a revolving door over 3 months. And they treated me like a guinea pig. I had gone off my medicine that was working for 8 years, and that was my own decision. They decide, okay, well, we'll trial you on different medicines. But how many medicines can you trial a person when the medicine is going to take 2 to 3 weeks in effect to take effect? So they were trialing me on different medicines between 11 days. They were not meeting with me consistently on a consistent basis, not day to day, not even every other day. I would say it's like one every 4 days I saw the doctor and met with a psychiatrist. I didn't see a therapist. There was no psychologist or counselor to meet with while I was an inpatient, which is another anomaly to me. Like I don't get that. I don't know why that's the case either. But there's just inconsistencies in how, if somebody with their insurance, based on their insurance, can get seen every day in the 3 days that they're there by the doctor. I don't know. And I worked in healthcare in an outpatient mental health clinic for 3 years, working with people just like me. Well, I wouldn't say just like me, but they had diagnoses like mine.
Mhm.
They didn't have the health insurance, that they had Medicaid, but it was just very hard to get them also. And I was working with the patients or the clients, it was hard to get them Medicaid. And then when they needed inpatient, that was a whole ball of wax that they'd be in for 2 to 4 days and that's it. And then they come back. I mean, thankfully they had people like me, social workers, to see them on a day-to-day basis, on a daily basis, which I did not have. It's still an issue to, if you need treatment for a week, 2 weeks, 2 months, what if you're so bad in your symptoms that you need it for more than a year? I mean, there's just a lot of inconsistencies in the system for patients, depending on too many factors, too many variables that shift,
All right. And is your book, Deliver Me from Crazy, available on audiobook?
Not yet. I'm working on that. And I want it to be, and it will be at some point. The next year, it should be out on Audible.
And you mentioned we talked about a little bit about your stay in the hospital. Why
Mhm.
did you have to go to the hospital?
I was exhibiting psychoses and psychotic thinking, and my behavior. One, I realized I needed the inpatient stay. I recognized I'm not right. I'm behaving and thinking out in left field. I need to get to the hospital to get better. So I committed myself there for, you know what, let me look what they said with the admission. I have it in the middle of the book, like the admission. So this is the second time I am admitted in my life to the hospital. Catherine is a 24-year-old married female who is living with her husband. She presents with psychotic and mood symptoms. She's stating that she is paranoid and hearing the voices of the demons. She accepted Christ into her life within the past recent and feels that she is leaving the kingdom's Lord. She has pressured speech, highly verbal, not decreased sleep, increased activity and productive things. She was maintained on Abilify for 4 to 5 years and has recently come off it. She also endorses a change of place of work, irritability, difficulty sleep. She said she was maintained on Abilify and felt the need to come off it. Justification for admission. So hospitalized in the past, drug and alcohol abuse history. I was binge drinking 1 to 2 times a week while I was in the mania before I went back into the hospital. Medical history, nothing there really. Family and social history. It lists these things: general appearance, disheveled, attitude, anxious behavior. My GAF score was 30, which is kind of low.
What exactly is the GAF
score?
Score?
Global Assessment of Functioning. They take your daily living skills and activities, and they based on how you're presenting.
So it's GAF, not GAP.
Yes, GAF. Yes.
All right.
And I was on the scale, I was on a 30. I think the top is like 60 or 50 range, and you're in good shape. And under like 40, you're kind of needing more attention. The initial discharge plan, the patient will be discharged when psychotic symptoms are better and mood more stable. So because I was in psychosis, really, not because I was a danger or harm to myself or others, which is not common. Usually most common is, suicidal thinking and plans, but still to have been admitted based on the psychosis there should be a standard there. I don't know if there is or not, but they saw that I was in dire enough need, in such a state of mind that I needed to be monitored around the clock.
All right. And why could you not be treated in the community?
I think I was doing so well and high functioning before I'd been admitted to the hospitals that when I was 16, I didn't realize I had this coming on. I didn't know I had bipolar disorder, or that I was going to have a break. So at that point, I'm living a high functioning life, and I'm starting to, dip down. As we're dipping down, we don't realize a social worker. I mean, I was seeing a counselor and psychiatrist, but I didn't know if, a peer support would be. That was nowhere on my radar. When I got back out of the hospital at 16, went to outpatient, and that helped me a lot. And I went there only for like the summer after my junior year of high school. And then I went back in and started high functioning again, graduate high school. Everything seems good. My symptoms are at bay, no side effects of the medicine. So I was just smooth sailing until I decided to go off the medicine again. And at that point, I was living on base with my husband on an Air Force base. And we didn't have, I don't know if we had access to social workers or not, but there wasn't a noticed need for it. And in the community, being that I was on base, it's kind of a world in of itself.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's probably why. And in social work and a lot of community-based health centers, the criteria is targeting a demographic that has lower income, which I don't understand myself. When I worked in that position as a social worker in a CCBHC, we mainly targeted those who had Medicaid, because Medicaid would pay for our program in the community. So we didn't really target those with higher income or middle income, which nobody is immune to, no matter what your income is, you're not immune to mental illness.
Okay. Do you feel that there was a lack of care or prejudice at the hospital?
Unfortunately, there was. And to my right mind and out of my right mind, I feel like there was a lot of manipulation, whether that was perceived or actual. There was instances, and I explain in the book what I go through, that lead me to, in summary, it was very hard to get that care, like I said, to be seen as much as I needed to be seen, to get the right back on the right medicine. They couldn't just put me back on what I was taking for 8 years when I was 24, and they had to use me as a guinea pig, I guess. So to that, I think that was a little bit discriminatory to keep me there for that long and still not find the right medicine dosage until I had been in and out of the hospital 3 times.
Uh,
So yeah, I think there was discrimination. I always felt like I would tell people, I feel like I'm being treated like a second-class citizen, just like really, really poorly. I went to the NICU with my husband when I had my firstborn, and the way we were treated there versus the way I'd been treated in the psychiatric facilities,
oh yeah.
night and day. Like NICU, they put us up in the room.
What
We
is a
stayed down
NICU? What?
a neonatal intensive care unit
Okay,
for
neonatal.
babies.
Oh, so
Yeah.
yeah. So when you're having a baby, you have all
Yeah.
the customer service. They're
Oh
happy,
yeah.
joyous. You
Yeah.
go to the psych hospital. It's
Well, we were in the NICU for my son who had been born without breath or heartbeat and ended up passing 8 days later. So he had to be in intensive care for them to put him on a ventilator. So being in that intensive care unit was like harrowing, right? It's a sad experience. So is a psych unit, but the way they treated us with compassion and care and let us see our son so much versus in the psych unit, you can't see anybody except on these certain hours that they change every other week with certain,
that is had
rules.
that has been. I work at a substance abuse treatment center
Mhm.
where substance abuse is the primary diagnosis that people have. And that COVID has really affected that because in-person
Mhm.
visitation is really important.
Yes. And no
But
matter what mental, medical, yeah.
and also though, yeah, switching up the days like that, I could see that really being harmful.
I don't understand it. Maybe there's a reason to it, but for a person who's out of their mind, you need structure, you need stability.
Yeah,
That's so key. And
and
to
that
switch
gives
things up like that to me
and
made it
that gives you
worse.
something to look forward to.
Yes, yes.
You mentioned some of the things at the hospital made you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, the first person I talked to as I entered, as I'm 24 years old, not the 16-year-old me. The first person I meet at the hospital, one of the faculty there, he sits me down in this room, just him and I in the beginning, and he says, just for safekeeping, do you want us to hold on to your wedding band? And I'm like, I had this harrowing, like this irking feeling of like, this is so wrong. Like, why would anybody ask for my wedding band to keep it safe? Did they do that on regular? Did they do that? I don't know. Like,
No,
I don't think that's standard protocol.
I
And it
work
made
at
me
a
feel weird.
substance abuse treatment center,
Mhm.
and if it's a really expensive, I've never heard like if it's a ring that you're wearing, we never asked to take it.
Right.
Maybe,
So I'm like thinking, what is this guy wanting my ring for if he can? And then later on, I did ask him to hold on to it for safekeeping because I was acting irrational,
yeah,
but I still shouldn't have even done that and given it to him. And the other things was they were keeping the clocks. There was 2 clocks adjacent to each other on 2 sides of the wall, and they were in different hours. Like one was 7 and the other would be 8, and keeping us in 2 different, you know, time zones in our minds is like, that's not helpful for somebody in psychosis. Also, the art on the wall was abstract art, and I don't know about other people, but when I was in psychosis, I
yeah.
totally was tripping. Like I was seeing things in those paintings that were not really there, but like
Mhm.
having the abstract art on the wall and just going in there with the way people treated me it made me uncomfortable.
And what changes do you want to see in the mental health system,
Well,
both from your work experience and your experience as a patient?
oh wow, two major things, right? So one, I believe faith has a critical role in recovery, for hope to transcend any kind of diagnosis. Faith is such a critical prayer, knowing, reading the Bible, being able to speak to God and in that way, in a prayer, in a spiritual way, is such a basis for like healing for me and a lot of people I know personally who have a diagnosis and are Christians, or believers. And then two is the inpatient care, in the hospitals, not having such a stark, sterile, like white wall, empty setting. And interior designer should come in there And maybe if they need to plant the chairs on the ground and secure them to the ground, great. But like whatever they need to do to make it safe, right? But also homey and comfortable and not feel like you're in a hospital. It just doesn't help. Yeah.
All right. And one more thing. Do you ever think about writing a fictional book?
Not really. I'm very nonfiction. Like I like to read nonfiction. I've read probably a handful of novels, and
Okay.
I'm such a perfectionist that if I see something that doesn't like isn't realistic to me in the novel, I don't even finish it. I'm
All
very
right.
yeah.
And when you're not being an advocate, what do you do for fun?
I have my 1-year-old, 1.5-year-old daughter,
Oh,
my husband, we just went to see family for our family wedding last weekend. It was great. A lot of family, friends. We hang out with the friends we have on base here. And I love to run. I'm an avid runner. I have done half marathons, 5Ks, very competitive. And I like to do my logo design, my freelance business.
all right. And the National Shattering Silence Coalition, you there is a link to it at the bottom of the video. And also, how can we go about buying your book?
You just go to Amazon and type in "but deliver me from crazy."
All right. Well, Katie, thank you for all that you do, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, Eric.
And have a
Yeah,
great rest of your day.
thank you.